you everyone for coming on a freezing cold night. It shows great commitment. I'm Christine Shawcroft. I'm a member of the Labour Party National Executive Committee representing constituency members, and I'm also a member of Tower Hamlets Momentum. This meeting is a joint meeting between Tower Hamlets Palestine Solidarity Committee, Jenin Friendship, and Tower Hamlets Momentum. And for people who are not as technologically challenged as I am, if you want to tweet anything, apparently it's hashtag THPSC, Tower Hamlets Palestine Solidarity Committee. So we're going to be, first we'll have the speakers, and then if people want to ask questions afterwards, questions would be nice rather than speeches yourself, and then when we've had all the questions, I'll give the speakers chance to come back. Okay. So the first speaker that we have is Hiyam Elyyan, who's director of the Saraya Women's and Children's Centre in Jerusalem.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Just wait a minute. So it's going to be Allahu Akbar.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Okay, sorry, I was told there was going to be a call to prayer at 7:30 and 8 o'clock, so I'm Not when we get another one, obviously we'll just stop the meeting. Right, sorry. So our first speaker, say, is Hiyam Elyyan, and we'll have questions to all the speakers at the end of the meeting, and the speakers will have a chance to come back. So, Hiyam.
Good evening, everybody.
Could you speak into the mic?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would thank you for coming here today to listen about human rights violations that's happening in Jerusalem and to Palestinians. Actually, I'm a director in a community center in Jerusalem, in the Old City, and I've been working since 14 years. And all our programs in the center are towards keeping the resilience of the Palestinians in the Old City. What I would like to say is, after 1967, the Palestinians were considered, who were stay in Jerusalem after the Israeli occupation, they were considered as immigrants, came that moment. So they gave them the Jerusalemite identity, which means that we can stay in Jerusalem as long as we are paying taxes and being under some conditions, like not leaving Jerusalem more than, at the beginning it was more 7 years, but now it's more than 2 years and we will lose the Jerusalemite. Having the Jerusalemite identity means that we just have this, it's a document that proves that you are living in Jerusalem, but it's not a citizenship. It doesn't enable you to have the rights of citizenship. Also, after 1967, it was meant that Jerusalem, East and West, should be the capital of Israel. And they start to take procedures since that time. Part of them start to evacuate every Jerusalemite who was outside the country. Either he was studying, or he was working, or he left for a reason, so as to make the majority of inhabitants in Jerusalem Israelis. The situation became much complicated by years because settlements increased, and they did the plan 2020, which means that after 2 years they are planning to make more than 70% of Palestinians, of inhabitants of Jerusalem are Israelis. Of course, the situation became much more complicated after Trump's decision to admit that East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem are united and they are the capital of Israel. Today I would like to talk about what kind of violations the Jerusalemites are experiencing now. The first one is the right for children, the right to have identity. It's a human right. It's a basic human right to have an identity. A lot of children in Jerusalem now, they don't have birth of certificates or identity. And the reasons is sometimes because one of the parents is a Jerusalemite and the other is from Palestinian territory, another place or another city from the West Bank. So when a person is living, for example, if a woman from Jerusalem got married to someone from West Bank, she can't live with him in the West Bank, because if she lives there, she will lose her identity. And if he And he cannot come to live to Jerusalem because he doesn't have identity. So they are living in two houses, the house for the husband and the house for the wife. And she can visit him by the end of the week, but she can't live with him all the time because her central life should be in Jerusalem. And this has a consequences. The children who are born to this woman are not admitted. They don't have certificate unless she proves that she is living in Jerusalem. And this is a long process that sometimes the child becomes 15 years and 20 years and he doesn't have certificate and he doesn't have identity, which means that he cannot move outside Jerusalem. He cannot go even to Bethlehem, which is 15 minutes from Jerusalem. He can't go to Ramallah. He's a prisoner. Also, a lot of women who are married to Jerusalemite guys, they could live in Jerusalem years and don't have the permission. They don't have the right of custody to the children. If there, for some reason, a problem with the husband, she can't leave her house because she wants to be close to her children. She can't visit her parents because this means that she will get out of Jerusalem and she needs a permission to come back again. So this dilemma that the parents are living all the time is not an easy thing. And to prove that you are living in Jerusalem is a story. It's not just about documents that you are paying taxes, rent a house, going to schools inside Jerusalem, going to health center in Jerusalem, but also they have to be sure that you are living in this house and not pretending that you are living. This means that if they come for a visit, that they don't tell you the time when they are coming, you have to be in the house. If you are not in the house, everything will be cancelled. And if you are lucky and was in the house, this means that they have to check everything. They have to check the bedroom, they have to check the cupboard, to open it, to see if you have clothes, to check your trash, if you have children, maybe to see if you are using this or not. And a lot of procedures that are really difficult now, and it's not bearable to. After the decision of Trump now, they cancel any appointment to the Ministry of Interior, and you find a lot of Palestinians who are standing in lines in front of the Ministry of Interior because they want either to make an identity for their children or they want to have a certificate, a birth certificate to their children, or they want to travel, they want travel document, which is the thing that we have. It's not a passport, but a travel document because they want to go to study or they want to go to travel anywhere in the world. So there are not appointments. And it's very clear for the government, the Israeli government, whoever wants to stay in Jerusalem, he should pay for this. So they look at us as if we are an economic project. So you want to pay taxes, you want to run a center. For example, we run a center. It's a non-profit center. It's a community center. We should we should not pay taxes. We should not pay municipal taxes. And this is what is happening to Israeli organizations, for example, that are non-profit organizations. But as Palestinian organization, if we don't pay taxes, this means that we should close the center. 2 years ago, we applied, as a center, we applied to have the tax-free. So they told us, well, they didn't find anything illegal that we do. We mainly work to empower people be able to live in Jerusalem. But they told us that some donors are maybe illegal, like, for example, they gave us a Swedish organization which was legalized to work in Jerusalem by the Israelis. We used to have a fund from them. They told us they have political activities, so we can't give you this. We told them that, but you give them a permission to work in Jerusalem. They gave us the same reply. Also for the Palestinians, as I told you, they are in lines in front of the Ministry of Interior. For example, if anybody wants to travel, he can, usually, he can pay around $100. They can give him a travel document. But now they stop this. Oh my God.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي.
So for us now, we can't make travel document, but they announce, if you want to make a travel document, you have to go to the airport and you have to pay $300 to take a travel document for 1 year, instead of having travel document and paying $100 for 5 years. So it's not just that violating your right to have an identity. They consider us as a project, an economic project. If you want to stay in Jerusalem, you have to pay. This is one issue. Another issue, the right to have nationality. This is a human right. Every child has the right to have nationality. Our children are not allowed to have this nationality. So if you look in our identity that we have, we are without any, we are stateless. We don't belong to any kind of citizenship. And also, it's not allowed for our children to talk about their history, to talk about their identity, to talk about their culture, which makes the life in Jerusalem very difficult for those children. It is a confusion for them. Who are we? Because most of the schools in Jerusalem, more than 60% of the schools are related to Israeli municipality. So in the syllabus, anything mentioned Palestine is cancelled. Anything concerning Palestine is not allowed. And also they try to impose also the Israeli syllabus, which talk about the history of Israelis. So this is another issue. The right to education for our children. After 1967, as Palestinians, we rely on education. Education was a priority for Palestinians to cope with all the situation that they passed through. But now, after 1967, the situation is being deteriorated completely. The rate of dropout for children in Jerusalem are more than 40%, because the situation of schools is difficult, because they're preventing teachers to come from West Bank to to Jerusalem because they are preventing the expanding of schools. A lot of schools are crowded, and even sometimes schools are not suitable for being a school. So this is another issue, which is, and also the right to be secure and safe and reach school safe is not available for children. Schools are broken into, they invade schools. If they want to arrest children, they can come inside schools, they can take the children they want, they can maybe kill what they want. So schools are not protected, they are not safe. Children, while going to schools, maybe will be stopped either on checkpoints, either by any soldier. They can stop them, they can check them, they can humiliate them. So it's not safe even to go to school. So this right is violated also. The right to be safe, as I told you, and protected, now the children in Jerusalem are not protected. If you come to Jerusalem and see how many checkpoints in the old city, you will be shocked. Because one of the gates, Damascus Gate, started from a point. There are two stable, they are not within them few meters, stable points for soldiers who are there. And when you come downstairs, maybe a few meters, you will find another point which is stable. Go out few meters, another checkpoint which is stable, and a lot of soldiers who are moving around the old city, and they can bring any child, talk to any youth, check them, humiliate them, ask for their identity, and if they don't have this identity, which is very precious for Jerusalemites, they will be punished, of course. And as I told you, there are a lot of children who doesn't have identity now because of the problems of the parents who are part of them from the West Bank, part of them from Jerusalem. So this is actually a situation that is really difficult. And they are making things much quickly now because they are protected by the international law. They are protected by the international community. And it's for them, it's easy. I remember I was studying in Birzeit University at the beginning of the 80s when the students used to protest against anything concerning the Palestinian life. They didn't dare to break into the university buildings. They didn't, because they care about the international point of view at that time. And there was like communications and between the international community and the Israeli. Now they don't care. They broke into hospitals and they kidnap and they kill. Last week they kidnapped students from Birzeit University. They came as civil people and they bring this student and protect and arrest him in front of everybody. And when the students came to protect their friend, they start to shoot. And the soldiers suddenly came to the university. So I'm talking now because it's really difficult for us as Palestinians. And I think that now people should know, because they can affect, I think. Because what is happening here, what is happening in Jerusalem, what is happening in everywhere in the world, is affecting everybody. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict is continued from 1947 till now, and nothing is happening. What is happening is that as Palestinians, we are losing more and more. And it was very clear that Oslo, even it was done under the umbrella of international community and great countries. It didn't work. It's destroyed now. And you can see, I can see this map is showing that this map, I think, expressed the situation after 1947, that this is the West Bank and Gaza. But now, what is left after the Oslo agreement is these spots here, the green spots. This is what is left for Palestinians now. They are living in presence in every. More than land was confiscated after Oslo. More than violation was happened. Okay. Maybe I talked a lot. Well, thank you very much for hearing me. And later, if anybody wants any question, I'm ready to answer.
We'll get into the discussion later too.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Hiyam. Our next speaker is Ibaa Abulayya, who's a translator from Jenin, who's going to be speaking from the body of the meeting, I believe, yeah?
Marhaba, hello everybody. I'm really grateful to have the chance to talk to you today, representing the twinning of Jenin to our Hamlets, and reflecting the views of people as ordinary people and civil society. It's true that I'm from Jenin, but I'm originally from a city that's called Haifa on the shores of the Mediterranean. It's right to the north of Palestine. I live in Jenin. That's because my family had to sacrifice its house, belongings, and land for the establishment of the State of Israel. So they fled to Jenin and lived as refugees there. Israel also controls, not only fled Palestinians and evacuated them from their houses, but divided Palestine into 3 kind of major areas to facilitate its control and land annexation. That was the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and even also divided the West Bank into different parts and areas for building settlements and houses for settlers. I myself, as a Palestinian citizen living in the West Bank, need to get a permit to enter Jerusalem, or East Jerusalem, which is part of the West Bank. That's a violation and an abuse for the right to movement for each and every Palestinian. What about the journey from Palestine to London? That actually took me about 2 ages. I'm sorry, like 2 days. It felt like 2 ages. I had to cross 3 borders, the Israeli borders. That's because Israel is controlling the entry and exit of each Palestinian. I also had to cross the Palestinian Authority borders, leaving to Jordan and entering also those Jordanian borders in order to go to the airport and take a plane and then fly to London. And even at the Heathrow airport, they even made it harder for me to get in. So that was restrictions on movements everywhere. inside the West Bank, there are different tools implemented by the Israeli occupation to restrict the movement of Palestinians. We've got checkpoints, we've got the separation wall, and also the settlements that are spreading everywhere. I used to study at Birzeit University, that's to the north of Ramallah, and I had to, for your notice, that's about an hour and 30 minutes drive from Jenin, where my family lives, to Ramallah. So I had to stay away from my family and friends in order to study at the university, because I never knew if I'm gonna make it on time or not for a lecture or to attend an exam because of the checkpoints. What does that mean? If I leave my house going to university on an early morning, a soldier might stop me, interrogate me, or might arrest me. I might be humiliated. I might not be able to make it back home. So who knows? It's just under the mercy of that soldier who's given instructions, of course. I'd like also to mention the land annexation. So Palestinians by today own about, control over 13% of land. So it's not as it shows in the map, it's as Hiyam mentioned.
This map, it shows that this is what is left from Palestine for Palestinians, the green spots.
And there's some copies of that map here.
Yeah, as everybody has a, yeah. The checkpoints and the wall that separates the cities from each other, and families can't go visit each other because the Israeli authorities aimed at facilitating the movement of Israeli settlers who live on the land that they do not even own. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, hello all of you. I'm very pleased to be here. My name's Jenny Manson, and my maiden name was Salomon, and I'm Jewish, but completely secular. My mother lived in Haifa when she was a young girl. She escaped a pogrom in the Ukraine, and she arrived in Haifa when she was about 5 and lived there till about 1925, 1926. However, when I began to identify as a Jew, in order to argue against the state of Israel and its behaviour and its conduct, my mother supported me, which was very welcome. So my mother was a Palestinian, and her best friend really was the Palestinian girl next door. And she used to say that the Palestinian girl's father always said, because my mother loved to argue, which has been carried on to me, "You're going to be a barrister one day." That's what she used to quote. And she loved his support. And my father's family were English Jews. I formed with many colleagues last July, Jewish Voice for Labour. It actually says voices, and we hope to be many voices, but Jewish Voice for Labour. For this purpose, many of us are totally secular, identified as Jews for a specific reason. There was an organisation called the Jewish Labour Movement, in which you don't have to either be Jewish or Labour. And you just have to be a movement. And I'm not questioning what they stand for, what they do, but their name is misleading. So we decided that we had to say that we are the Jewish Voice for Labour. But if any of you here are interested, we have associate members. In fact, the associate members are getting nearly the same number as the full members. Because we're very keen to not be exclusive in that way. You have to be Labour. You can't be just a movement. You have to be Labour or Jewish and Labour. we started the organisation for two purposes, I would say. One was to work with other Jewish organisations, which I'll mention, on behalf of Palestinian rights, and the other was to tackle allegations of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but that's for another night, if you're interested in a talk. And I was actually with various members of staff of Jeremy Corbyn and Shami Chakrabarti today talking about that. And certainly recently, Jewish Voice for Labour is starting to be listened to more as things change in the Labour Party. But tonight is about Palestinians. It took me a while to change my mind about Israel. I don't know whether there are any other Jews in the audience here, and whether it took them a while as well. I went when I was a student before I went to university in 1966. I left school quite young, and I wasn't comfortable there. But it took a while for the discomfort to grow, and in the early 2001, I joined Jews for Justice for Palestinians, which some of you might know about, and I want to talk a little bit about what I do with them. But more recently, I went to the West Bank, so I didn't want to go back to Israel again after '66, so my only other trip was with a Jewish group, another group which I don't identify terribly much with, but organised very good trips to the West Bank at the end of 2016. I don't need to repeat here really what I saw, although it was horrifying. The checkpoints, the injustice we were taken around East Jerusalem. Just want to mention a couple of points people may not know about. One, the village, I've forgotten the name of it, where they have a demonstration every Friday night. You may know. Yeah. Two of the women we talked to had both been shot in the leg. They were shot in the leg because a child had picked up a stone. If a child picks up a stone, the military are allowed to shoot. Now, can you imagine in England, whatever we think of our country, if demonstrators are shot routinely and the normalcy of shooting? Another aspect is the military courts. Now, I don't know if you know, but if you're a settler living in comparative luxury and with well-watered lands and a lovely swimming pool, next door to a village where in many cases high unemployment and extreme poverty, if a settler steals from the local shop and a Palestinian steals from a local shop, the Israeli is subject to the civil courts back in Israel, and children can't be taken into custody and they have proper protection. But the Palestinian is subject to the military courts, and this is due to a military order that has not been lifted. And my husband, who we each get shot by particular things, it was the military courts that absolutely drove him to despair. They were very neglected buildings. The Arabic translator was shouting the translation, and he wasn't translating, we heard, the full text. And we saw a child, 15 or 16, being hugged by his parents, and the father spoke to us afterwards, and he said, I only see my son once a year or so when he's taken to the court, because of him or some other reason, my freedom to travel was taken away from me, so I can't go and visit him in the... but almost the worst thing for me, which wasn't the worst thing, but the thing I felt so impotent afterwards, was when we went to another village, I'm afraid I've forgotten its name, and one of the people who spoke to us, my husband and I, Mike, spoke to him, and he said, I get weepy on this, he said, can you help me? And I've come back and thought, how am I going to help? Well, one more point, and then I'll get on to what possible help we can all do. I knew I was going to hear you two, but even so, I spoke to a Palestinian whom I know well. She's back in Palestine at the moment, and she's called Amal. And the reason I spoke to her was what she did at a meeting I went to where I heard her speak, is she talked a little bit about actually what it feels like to her, for her day by day, less about the facts and more about the sense. So she said that she'd come to this particular meeting because she wanted to, I talked to her on the phone and I wrote down, because it's important to humanize the Israel-Palestine issue, because we're all human beings, and it's very easy to not recognize this. But then she was concerned that some of the people at the meeting sort of assumed that there were two sides to this issue, that, you know, the Palestinians would have to give a bit and the Israelis would have to give a bit. well, of course, it is absolutely crazy. There's nothing more for the Palestinians to give. So she said that it's impossible, she said. You're not equal in life to your Israeli counterparts, but you're supposed to be equal in responsibility. You're supposed to be able to sort it out. But then she said, you're not free ever. I've never been free. I'm only free when I'm not in my own country. And it's not just about checkpoints and barriers. It's about being denied the atmosphere to show who you are and what you want to do with your life. And finally, we talked about the fact that she considers that Palestinian lives are cheap, and the only attention is to when an Israeli is hurt. So what can we do? Well, probably the most useful thing I do is I lobby for the organisation called Jews for Justice for Palestinians, which means going round to the embassies and talking to them. I don't know if it's useful or depressing, I'll just explain. I found that the view of diplomats in all the embassies we've been to, including the American embassy, I might say, they are aware of the imbalance, they are aware of the abuse of Palestinian rights, and they are sympathetic towards it. What we've got is, and maybe that's something Christine to comment on, because it's a wider view really, we've got this impasse, haven't we? Even before Trump, there is no way that the European countries and America are going to, at the moment, to really force Israel into any behavior. I mean, we must think perhaps about the various sanctions that the BDS movement is one option. Sorry, I'm not being very encouraging, but I come away from these embassies thinking, what ammunition can we give Europe and America, let's say post-Trump, to make them realise that eventually they are going to have to force Israel to change its ways, either with sanctions or withdrawal of aid or withdrawal of military support. We spoke to the Russians, interesting, quite a while before this crisis, and the Russian view was it's going to, not very encouraging either, but it's going to explode. We are just standing by. Eventually, the Arab countries will be armed significantly and will turn on Israel, which isn't also a very good solution, because I don't know what the rest of you think, but I don't want anyone to be killed, Israelis or Palestinians. Sorry, not very encouraging, but I think the main point to bear in mind is there aren't two sides to this issue. I mean, don't let people, I think, convince you that there's got to be a proper negotiation, as in the Palestinians have got to concede. That's just not, it's not fair, there's nothing to concede. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Our next speaker is Kiri Tunks, who is Vice President of what is now the NEU, the National Education Union, the NUT section. I'm a member of the NUT myself, so, well, I'm now a member of the NEU, obviously. She's a campaigner for Palestine, and she's going to speak to us now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and you've already heard very eloquently from the other three speakers about just what a dreadful situation it is in Palestine. It is, I have to say, and so I apologise to some of you in the audience, I can see a few people that will have heard me make this speech before. The tragic fact is the speech has to be made again and again because we have made very little progress on this, and I think it is a source of great shame of our government and this country that despite successive governments, successive foreign ministers telling us that they absolutely agree with us that what is happening to children in Palestine is indefensible, they have failed to do anything about it. And so I'm here again giving a speech that is very similar to the speeches I've given over the past 8 or 9 years, and I will try and do it in a way that kind of really brings home the urgency of this case to you. So just to say that, as you might have gathered, Israel is the only country in the world that routinely arrests, detains and punishes children in a military court system. There is no other country that does it. So where there are war situations, there might be temporary military courts and so on, but Israel has been doing this since 1967. Children also, it should be said, are targeted. This is not accidental. This is not children getting caught up in the, they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is deliberate targeting of children to undermine the resistance of the communities and the families against an illegal military occupation. And the fact that we have what is a country that is apparently, supposedly a democracy, using children in this way is utterly despicable. And you know, I just cannot understand how the whole world is just letting this continue. As you've heard, I'm talking mainly about the West Bank here. Well, I'm going to talk entirely about the West Bank because the Gaza situation is a whole different story. Israel military law has complete control over the West Bank. That's 2.8 million Palestinians living there. Okay? The Palestinians have absolutely no say in how that law is exercised. They just have to submit to it and get by with it and try and survive it. As you've heard, Israeli settlers, illegal Israeli settlers who live in the West Bank are subject to Israeli civilian law. But the Palestinians who are living in their land are subject to Israeli military law. The military orders, since 1967, there's been about 1,700 of them. They are all in Arabic. They're not translated. That is in breach of international law. So the laws by which the Palestinians are having to live, they are not even given those laws in their own language. Okay, again, absolutely ridiculous. So since 1967, we know that about 750,000, 800,000 women, men and children have been detained under the military law. Children are most commonly prosecuted for stone throwing or alleged stone throwing. The routine experience of a child who is arrested will be that they are arrested at night from their homes. They will be taken from their family. They will not be told where they are going. They will have their hands tied behind their back with those plastic ties. They will be thrown onto the floor of a military vehicle where they will be subject, quite likely, to kicking and verbal abuse, slurs and so on against members of the family. They will not be given a lawyer. They will be interviewed and they will be coerced into confessing. They will be told that they've been given their name by various other children in the village. They have no right to see their family. Their family are not told where they're going. 50% of them are taken to prisons in Israel, which is against international law. And over 99% of the cases brought against these children end in conviction. Now, that is not a justice system. That is an abomination, quite frankly. There is a growing increase in the use of solitary confinement, I'm afraid, in recent years. So we know that in 2000, I think the figures were 23 years, in 2012 to 2015, there were about 66 cases of young people being held in solitary confinement. The longest child was held for 45 days. 45 days, a child in solitary confinement. Okay, in 2017, so last year, 25 children were held in solitary confinement. The average length, 17 days. The longest length, 29 days. These are children. I mean, solitary confinement is torture for anybody, but these are children. Now, this government has done some things, and so has the UN. There have been 2 reports on Palestinian child prisoners. The first one was from our government in 2012. It's still a very good report. It's still online. I would urge you to find it. They found Israel in breach of 8 international legal obligations under the UN Convention of the Right of the Child and the 4th Geneva Convention. Discrimination, best interest of the child, premature resort to detention, so on and so on. There's a great long list of things. Okay? Now, the UK lawyers found these, they were a group of independent UK lawyers. They were funded by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. They went over there, okay? They found this stuff out. They've tried to go back since to check on progress. Every time they've tried to go, Israel has found a reason for them not to go. One time it was because they were bombing Gaza. So any time we've tried to go back, okay, they don't let us go back and check. And the report found that if all that evidence proved to be true, that Israel would be in breach of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child and on laws to do with international torture. A little bit later, the UN sent a report, and they went and they found almost exactly the same thing. They've made 38 recommendations, very, very similar findings. And again, they said that there is, in fact, I'm going to read this because this is quite damning. The ill treatment of children who come into contact with the military detention system appears to be widespread, systematic and institutionalised throughout the process, from the moment of arrest until the child's prosecution and eventual conviction and sentencing. And they found that allegations of ill treatment have not significantly decreased. So we're talking about 91% of children being tied in the hands, by their hands, the way that I've said. 78% of children being blindfolded, 82% subject to physical violence, and so on. Neither of those groups have been allowed to go back. Now, some of the things that those reports asked were for some changes, and Israel seemed to make a bit of a move on that. They said, oh, okay, we'll make a few changes. So they agreed that they would stop arresting children at night, okay, because they routinely turn up 2 o'clock in the morning, banging on the door, get everybody up, drag one of the boys out of bed. It's terrifying for the whole family. I mean, just imagine the impact, not only on the child, but on the rest of the family and the children in that family. They said, oh, we'll stop arresting the children at night. So what they did instead was they went to issue the summonses at night, so that the child would get arrested at the police station the next day, but they still woke the family up in the middle of the night. They still sent soldiers in, armed soldiers with, you know, full camouflage gear into these people's homes. They also made a thing about changing to do with the way that they kind of put children on trial, the ages that they were on trial, they kind of equalised it a bit. But they left the sentencing the same. And when you've got a conviction rate of 99%, really fiddling around with the age at what you kind of put somebody through a specific legal process becomes absolutely irrelevant. And as I've said, the solitary confinement is getting worse. People have talked about the settlements. The settlements are absolutely key to this. These children are being arrested around settlements. These settlements are illegal. There's hundreds of them. There's 500,000 or more illegal Israeli settlers. So when people talk about Oslo and the two-state solution, are they lying? That's just not going to happen while the settlements are there. If we don't deal with the settlements, we can't solve any of these problems. Palestine Solidarity we have agreed now to make this a priority campaign. It is one of the key campaigns for PSC. There's various things on the website. We would urge you to get involved. We are getting traction on this. We've got an EDM on this issue at the minute. I think it's the 4th most popular EDM. So it is a way of getting people's attention. We've got lots of emails to Boris Johnson, to our MPs and so on, very, very high numbers of those. We know this is an issue that the government is very sensitive on. It's something like in the FCO, it's like their 2nd or 3rd biggest post bag. They really don't like it. Hardly anybody in Parliament thinks doing this to children is a good idea. So they're very sensitive on it, and I would urge you to do what you can. There's an activist toolkit which is coming out soon, so that we can get as many meetings like this around the country on this issue of child prisoners. There's going to be speakers' notes, films, other resources and so on. There's the Palestinian Prisoners Day on the 17th of April, and we're going to have some stunts around that. We hope people in Tower Hamlets will want to do that, and it will be a key focus of the November lobby. I just finished by saying that I was at Women's TUC last week, and I'm proud to say that my union got an emergency motion on Ahed Tamimi and her family passed unanimously by Women's TUC. It was a brilliant debate. It was one of the best debates of the whole conference. And part of that was an agreement to send a delegation from Women's TUC to Palestine this year. And we're going to work really, really hard to make sure that happens. We used Ahed Tamimi as our kind of our hook. We have to be careful not to make celebrities out of individual children, okay, because this is something that is affecting hundreds of children. But we also have to recognise that Ahed Tamimi has a media presence and has caught the attention, and we have to also work with the Tamimi family to try and, kind of use that, get her out, but also use that to expose what is happening to the other children. So there's also resources on the PSC website about that. I'm going to end with something, again, I've used this quote a lot, but it is one of the things that someone said to me that has just stuck with me all through, the last 10, 12 years. We were in Nabi Saleh in Manal and Manal Tamimi's house, and Bassem was there, and they showed us the clips of what happens to them in their village, how this village, which is right next to a settlement, is shut down, is raided, routinely tear gas. The children are, they live in a kind of a very traumatic war-like zone. They find it very difficult to get to school and so on. And they're often criticised for bringing their children into the struggle. And they said, well, our children were in the struggle. You were tear gassing their houses. That was traumatising for them. The way that we helped them cope with this is we brought them into the struggle and we made them agents to challenge it. And actually, that really, you can see that really helps the young people of that village. And the young women in that village are absolutely incredible. And as we sat in Bassem Tamimi's, Manal Tamimi's sitting room, and we were crying, frankly, because of what is happening to that family and to the Palestinians is so terrible that it is very hard not to kind of weep. And Bassem looked at us and he said, well, thank you for your tears, we're very grateful, but they're not enough, so could you go away and do something? And ever since he said that to me, I've done my best to go and do what I can, and I'd urge you to do the same too. Thanks very much.
Right, thanks very much. Sybil Cock is now just going to say a few things about Tower Hamlets Palestine Solidarity Campaign. There's supposed to be an attendance list going around. It's on a black clipboard, if anybody could put their details on there. And we have a stall over here, but anyway, Sybil.
I'm not going to take up any of your time, except to say that we are a branch of Palestine Solidarity campaign in the borough of Tower Hamlets. There's a couple of leaflets on your chair. We would really appreciate it if you would join PSC. It only costs a small amount of money, very small if you're unemployed or unwaged. Get yourself onto our mailing list and join us in the actions that we're doing, because we're doing a lot of things around child prisoners, around boycott, divestment and sanctions, as well as we're very, very proud to host our Palestinian women. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Sybil. We've got time for a few questions to the speakers. If people can say their name and where they're from and which speaker they're particularly asking the question of, that'd be useful. I think we've got a mic, have we? Or you can come use this one or stand up and shout or whatever. Is there anyone wants to ask anything or make a comment? Yeah, in the middle there. Sorry, isn't it? Yeah, sure.
So just to say, I'm Jenin. I'm a member of Tower Hamlets PSC and Tower Hamlets and Jenin Friendship Association. I'm also the chair of the British Association of Social Workers. Can I shout? Yeah, shout. And I'm also involved in the Palestine UK Social Work Network. I just want to say something very briefly about Munta Amira, who was the General Secretary of the Palestinian Union of Social Workers and Psychologists, and he's now the coordinator of the Palestinian Popular Struggle Committee. He lives in Aida camp in Bethlehem, and he was arrested on the 27th of December. And this is the photograph of him being arrested, and he was holding a photograph of Ahed Tamimi peacefully protesting her arrest. And a week ago, on the 12th of March, Munta was sentenced to 6 months in prison on 4 offences, including protesting without a permit or something of that nature, which is not an offence in international law. I'm being filmed by Jerry as I'm saying this, and I was going to read out from my iPhone what Munta Amira said to the judge in the military court as he was sentenced to 6 months. I don't remember the words he said, but he basically told the judge that he would not, that this was his land and he did not have to ask for the right to protest in his own land. So this is in tribute to Munta Amira. There's an international campaign calling for his immediate release. The British Association of Social Workers are part of that campaign. If you just Google Munta Amira petition, then you please sign the online petition, close on 15,000 signatures. And if you Google Munta Amira Baswa, B-A-S-W, you can read our statement, which also calls for the end of the military detention of Palestinian children. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wish to say anything or ask anything? Yeah. So do you want the mic?
My name's Hannah. I'm from Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism. Thank you so much for your speeches. Really important to be armed with as much fact as possible. It's very moving to hear speakers from Palestine about what daily life is like. I'd just like to ask you what you think we can do on the streets in Britain in terms of protest, demonstration. Where should we be directing our anger? And my second question is to those in the Labour Party. If Jeremy Corbyn leads the Labour Party to victory at the next general election, will Britain stop selling arms to Israel?
Are there any other questions, or have the speakers come back now? Yeah, just one.
I'm struck by this map, actually. I mean, I've seen it before, but each time I look at it, it just horrifies me. And it brings the question, really, for those of you from Palestine, is do you still think that a two-state solution is possible?
No, we don't think so. It's impossible. It's impossible. But I want to first supply the question, what do we think about demonstration of Britain and streets? This is what I understand, or this is...
What can we do on the streets to spread the information that you're giving us so that people know about these things?
Well,
what do you advise us, or how can we take your message forward?
I think every activity is important for Palestinians to raise awareness about what is happening in Palestine. Either was a demonstration or a talking or lecture or whatever, because the media is not helping to show the truth, show the situation that the Palestinians are going through. And at the end, I believe that if people make effort, it will be heard and something will change. So this is what we rely on, because what is said now that if it is possible for two states, it's impossible, because nothing is left. Nothing is left.
Ibaa, do you want to say anything? Oh, sorry. Okay, there's another question, yeah? Yeah, just about.
Oh, and I have a question about Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, we've got a bit, yeah. So,
just a quick.
I'm going to ask
I'm Mark from Hamlets presenting, and I just wondered if you could say a bit about whether, or to what extent there's an effect or what the state is of the resistance movement within the Jewish community.
Sorry.
For me, or
No.
all, because I know.
Again.
For everyone.
Well, I know.
Particularly for Palestinians, but for everyone.
Okay.
so all the speakers can come back.
Yeah.
So if you want to start, and then we'll take it again.
Sorry.
No, in Palestine.
Well, it is.
Sorry,
It is.
it is.
I know a bit about that. Yes, and you probably do too. But that's
Again.
So,
Sorry.
Shall I
I think
start?
something about the Jewish people.
Shall I start and then you'll hear it?
Yeah, okay. If you
Organisations like B'Tselem, the human rights, Rabbis for Human Rights, they are struggling, I'm afraid. Life is becoming very difficult for them. They are at risk. For example, in Jerusalem, they don't show what they do on their label. And this is probably the most worrying aspect for me of the recent years in Israel, that the opposition is very uncomfortable. Somebody called Howard Cohen has just written an article about the fact he's borne it for a long time, but he can't stay there any longer. So he was one of the few people, the last Gaza war, the Jewish people living there who rebelled, who argued against it, were few and felt at risk. And the editor of Haaretz, I think it's the editor, who is a brave man and did argue against the war, has to have bodyguards, I believe. It's not a good time for the Jewish opposition. There is still some, though. I mean, there is still some law, and there is still some democracy.
yes, I agree with my friend here, because the activists, the Jewish activists now, they are not treated in a good way. They are disappeared, because at the beginning of 80s you will find demonstration of people, thousands of people, of Jewish people, protest against what is going against the Palestinian. But now you can't find this, because even media is not democratic anyway, and it's biased, and those who are pro-Palestinian are punished, and they are accused if they are, as if they are traitors or something. So it's not easy even for those activists. I know a professor, an academic professor, Beilit, I think, she's a lecturer in Hebrew University. She made a research about how the Jewish people see Palestinians in their syllabus books, in their school books. And she reflects something which was really interesting and horrible to the Israelis. And they boycott her. They don't invite her to any academic conference or any. She's just invited by Palestinians now to talk about things, or they try to boycott anybody, even those academic people who are talking about anything against Israel.
Ibaa, did you want to add anything to any of the comments about the questions? And then I'll take
lady here.
Okay. Then.
Sorry, I just wanted just to thank the speakers and just to say that there's quite a lot of us girls from the Labour Party Women Forum who've got the motion through, stop the imprisonment of Palestinian children. I also went to Palestine a couple of years ago and I volunteered in one of the refugee camps with autistic children. And most of the children you meet, well, more than half of them had already been to jail, and it's like something that's, you know, like stayed in my mind and in my heart. But yeah, thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Kiri, would you like to anything with the questions?
I'm not sure I've got any expertise further than the Palestinians, and I don't know about Jeremy Corbyn in the arms. I really hope so, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we do to make that happen. But I mean, I think, you know, that is a reasonable request, and I would certainly support that in the Labour movement. So yeah, let's do that as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a quick thing. Do you think the BDS is actually working as a so the sanctions against?
Yeah, I think the BDS is working very well with the Palestinian, and they make a lot of, they took a lot of decisions and they raise awareness towards a lot of issues concerning Palestinians. But I think that they are punished now, and the government start to take decisions against them, which means that they are also punished. It's really upset.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh,
Can I just say something about BDS? I think since the effective end of the peace process, so-called peace process, Oslo, 25 years of getting Palestinians to talk while more land is taken away. Since the end of that a couple of years ago, the Israelis have put their energy and their money into trying to undermine the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, and trying to delegitimise what people, like people in this room and Palestinians, of course, are trying to do. And I think much of the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn about anti-Semitism are actually part of that. The fact that they have a massive machine, it's called the Hasbara, which is a sort of, I think, Hebrew for publicity, and they will trawl through people's Facebook, they will just do anything to accuse us of anti-Semitism and of undermining Israel and trying to conflate opposition to the actions of the State of Israel with opposition to Jews and anti-Semitism.
Can I say one thing about what Jeremy Corbyn can do and not do? Going back to my point about lobbying, the countries that have tried to apply certain sort of sanctions tended to be Britain, France, Germany, although they have difficulty, you can imagine why, and Sweden. Sweden's been very good. Now, Britain hasn't been good recently, surprise, surprise. While Boris has been there, no one quite knows what the foreign policy is. So when Corbyn gets in, I would give him a little bit of a leeway about how much he can do on things like stopping arms, and very much encourage a Labour government to start being tough diplomatically again with other countries. That's probably the strongest thing he can do.
I mean, I can't speak for Jeremy, but certainly it'd be, I mean, I don't think we should sell arms to anybody, actually. But you know, people who are in the Labour Party, I mean, the way to get this policy through is to, you know, is to be putting resolutions to conference, and, you know, the policies for the manifesto, for, you know, the next manifesto are currently being you know, discussed and drawn up. So it'd be good for people who are in the Labour Party to be putting, you know, that resolution through, put it to the policy commission, the relevant policy commission, put it to conference, and so on. And this is how policy is made. Sorry, yeah, another hand there, yeah.
I have a question to all the speakers, and I'd like to have an honest answer. Do you really think, with all the tested and tried methods, which have been quite ineffective in the last 60 years, anything positive can be changed for the Palestinian people? Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that putting early motions in the parliament, or writing to the MPs, or lobbying the MPs, or visiting the embassies can help the Palestinian people at all? I mean, look at that map here. Yeah. Is this a defeat for the Palestinian people? No. It is not a defeat for the Palestinian people, it is the defeat of the working class people in Europe and the organizations who are representing the working classes in Europe. Jeremy Corbyn, you said. Well, I remember him. He's been a staunch defender of Palestine, yes, and we supported him as well. But then, the staunch defender of Palestine, when he's elected as the chairman of the Labour Party, he said, I quote, anytime I go to Israel, I see the democracy there and admire their democracy. Well, if what you have said during your speeches is true, there is no democracy at all in Israel. And how can the so-called left chairman of the Labour Party say that he's now admiring the democracy in Israel?
So who's the chairman?
I mean, the leader of the Labour Party, yeah, Jeremy Corbyn. So, if the struggle for Palestine and for the Palestinian people is not a combined struggle in Britain against the British ruling class, against British imperialism, there is no way the balance of power in the world is not going to change, and it's not going to change for the Palestinians either. If you really want to be involved in a struggle for Palestinians, you need to be involved in a struggle in this country against the imperialist British state and all its forms of organization. Because it happens to be that Britain actually was the country 101 years ago which planted the seed of the Zionist settler state, colonial state of Israel in the Middle East for its own international imperialist interests. So what are we doing here? What are we talking about here by building a movement in Britain, which is the cause of the problem after the First World War in Palestine and for the Palestinian people? I mean, what kind of strategy, what kind of tactics do we need? I mean, lobbying and this don't help, obviously. We see the map. This is the 60 years of defeat of the working class movement in Britain and in Europe.
The speakers will come back to this question if you
we
can
need to do
wind up.
things differently, more radically and differently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, what I would say is I think part of the answer is to build struggles in Israel with the working class in Israel. There are all sorts of problems in Israel that we need that kind of need addressing. It's not a happy society, so there are problems there as well. And it may be, that's something we want to work on. But from our point of view here in Britain, we have a responsibility of solidarity to the Palestinian people. They have asked us to do certain things, and we work with them and we do what they ask us to do. It's not our place to tell the Palestinians what they need to do to find justice and peace in their region. So the bigger political questions, fine, we can have those bigger political questions, but as a solidarity activist, I take my lead from the Palestinian people, and I will do what I can with my government. And it might feel sometimes that the EDMs don't work and the letters don't work, and it might feel that progress is slow, but sometimes these things do take a long time. We've had struggles in the past that have taken years to actually get traction and get somewhere, and we have to believe, I have to believe, that if we keep going and if we bring more and more people to the movement, we will make a difference, because that's what the Palestinians are asking us to do, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Thank you. Any last comments, Jenny, Hiyam?
Well, I would say that the Hasbara you were talking about, I'm not sure if that's the pronunciation, and the crackdown of dissent in Israel is because actually, in a way, Israel is losing. And I know you're looking at the bigger picture, but we can't always get the world, the whole problem of imperialism and injustice. But on this particular point, there's a lot of evidence that, in fact, you won't believe it, but views are actually shifting in America. When views start to shift in America, things will start to change. And I think, in fact, that the popularity of Israel in this country, apparently they're the second least popular country after North Korea. There is significant opposition to Israel. And if you remember apartheid, if you remember the wall, if you remember Ireland, they weren't as difficult as this one, but they did actually suddenly something cracked. And I think something will crack here. And that's why I think we should go on lobbying. And we should have Jeremy Corbyn in, who wants the same sort of change as we do, but we shouldn't expect a miracle immediately. I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, what I actually want to say is lobbying and solidarity for Palestinians is important. And that's why we are talking to you people, because we know that the people, though I believe that, Balfour put something 1,000 years and it is something important. But I believe that the people can change if they become aware about what is happening and they believe that what is happening to Palestinians is a harm and they can do something in the long run. So I just thank you, and I appreciate any kind of support or activity that will raise the awareness and that will affect in the future the government position to Palestinians. Thank you very much. Sorry for my...
I add one more thing.
Please, yeah, do you want the mic?
I might answer your question with another question. If you think that lobbying or standing in solidarity with Palestinians, signing petitions, protesting in streets in different countries around the world for Palestinians would make any difference, then why would Israel stand against such activities? Why would it impose sanctions against the BDS, for example? So if this is not getting it, like as a whole thing, or maybe freeing Palestine, but it's leaving an effect on it and doing something.
Thank you. Well, I'm afraid it is the end of the meeting now. I mean, if you've got any quick points you want to make to any of the speakers afterwards, but we're supposed to be out at 9. So I'd just like to thank everyone for coming, and safe journey home.